Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander Score studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I've got the sleeper hits, those underrated cards for you from 2024. There are a lot of heavy hitters from this year, a lot of pushed and over-pushed cards from the year as well, and cards that, well, really stood out as commanders in the 99. And these cards in the 99, I am telling you, are being slept on, are underrated. All of them are less than 1% of decks in EDH Rec, according to EDH Rec, and they're also all less than $1, all budget friendly. Let's jump into them. So, first up, we're just going with whatever order Moxfield put them in. I believe, just Wooburg, and then Multicolor, and then Colorless, apparently, is how we're going. But regardless, the very first card I'm going to be talking about is one of the first ones that came to mind when making this list, Divine Resilience. This card is huge. This card is massive. When it comes to cards making an impact in the format, flexibility can be key for certain components to decks. And this card is incredibly flexible. Instant for a single white mana, or you can kick it for an extra 2 and a white. Target creature control gains indestructible until end of turn. If this spell was kicked, instead, any number of target creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So basically, this is either singular target protection, or it is targeted protection for your entire team. And do keep in mind that it does target for like heroic type things and stuff like that. Valor, I think, is the other one. Anyways, what matters is basically this is a dual mode card where, sure, if you just have one mana lying around and someone casts a Wrath and you're like, yeah, let's save, most likely, my commander, but whatever my most important creature is, cool, I'm saving that one. That is huge. That is worth the cost of admission. But of course, if you've got the mana available, it's like, yeah, I just need to save my entire team. Cool, I can do that as well. So it is flexible again in the fact that it is either 1 mana or, sure, 4, which is slightly more than what you'd be paying normally for most, like, protect my entire team spells, which are typically around 3. Yeah, outside of basically, like, heroic intervention, they're typically around 3. You're paying 1 extra, but again, you get that flexibility. That is huge, and the 1 mana saving your commander can save your game a ton of times. Moving on, Salvation Swan. It's just kind of funny when you look at this, like, hi everyone, I am a swan and I'm here to save the day. 3/3 bird cleric with flash and flying for 4 mana in total in white. Whenever it or another bird you control enters, exile to 1 target creature control without flying, return to the battlefield, aren't going to control the flying counter on the beginning next end step. Basically, this is Restoration Angel, but it's a swan. This is essentially the exact same thing, but slightly different in how it operates. Because again, this one, unlike Restoration Angel, which basically says, hey, you can only save non-angels, this one is you can only save, non-flyers. Now that technically is more broad, but still it actually benefits you even more because it actually turns that creature that you are saving into a flyer. And I do say saving in that, like, the main mode of operation around this is essentially, again, oh, they're going to deal with one of my things. Cool, I'll flash this in, I'll blink that thing, it is saved, all right? It is coming back with a flying counter on it. It's potentially even better than it was with that flying counter on it. Also, of course, it works really good in ETB decks. Decks that are like, you know what, let's use and abuse ETBs. And of course, unless you've got, like, every single creature in the deck has flying that has the ETB, sure, don't utilize that. But the vast majority of the time, it's going to be like, oh, okay, creatures like Sun Titan, etc., 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 that don't inherently have flying. And you're like, okay, cool. I get to use and abuse an ETB and also grant that creature flying, which can be great. So, yeah, again, you are not only benefiting yourself when it comes to blinking the creature, getting whatever ETB they have again, or leave the battlefield trigger if they have that too. That being said, of course, the thing that you're getting, of course, is, again, that flying counter, which is a great thing to have. And in the case that you actually want to, maybe get that ETB more times than just one off of this, maybe you got other like mass blink effects like Yorion, cool. If you're blinking those creatures that have flying counters on them, you can remove those flying counters to make it so you can blink them again with this. Do keep that in mind. There's a lot going on with this one. And again, keep in mind, it counts other birds too. So like if you've got like bird tribal or just a decent amount of birds in the deck too, or changelings, you can also blink other things too. So do keep that in mind. Next up, Mischievous Mystic. We're moving over to blue with this uncommon from Foundations, a 2/1 flying human wizard for 2 mana in blue. Whenever you draw your second card, each turn create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. Again, keep in mind this does say each turn, not just your own. Even if it was just your own, sure, you get a good amount of value out of that throughout the game. Again, making a 1/1 flying fairy every single one of your turns if you have a consistent draw engine, which is very easy for you to do. You know, in blue, you got plenty of ways to draw an extra card on your turn. I mean, at the very least, and I'm not saying this is Bitter Blossom. This is not Bitter Blossom, because Bitter Blossom obviously is better. You lose life with Bitter Blossom, but it is a guaranteed way to make those fairies, those 1/1 flyers, essentially, and it's also on an enchantment, which is hardier. That being said, this is again, a creature, sure, so it's easier to take out, but it is a 2/1 flyer for just 2 mana. And also, again, it's on every single turn, not just your own. Once you're set up properly and you've got ways to draw a lot of cards throughout the game, I mean, this can be, hey, with each trip around the table, make 4 1/1 flyers. That is huge for a go-wide strategy, huge for a flyer strategy, huge for a token strategy. Again, if you've got some draw engines in the deck, some ways to draw cards, even if they are, say, like, you know, looting effects, like Merfolk looter type cards, yeah, that works too. So if you've got a lot of good draw in your deck, this can be a huge card for you. Cycling decks can utilize it as well. Next up, Copycrook. It seems like we are getting these days like more and more clones each year, where it's like, okay, a clone, but it does this instead. A clone, but it does that instead. And this is a very good version of clone. A 0/0 shapeshifter rogue that costs 2 blue Copycrook. Says you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature in the battlefield except it has. Whenever this creature attacks, it connives. And again, that means draw a card, discard a card. If you discard a non-land card, put a counter on this creature. So basically, again, clones are very good in Commander because they can be so flexible. And again, you've got so many different options for them to copy because you've got, well, 3 opponents versus just 1 opponent. So you've got plenty of creatures that you can actually utilize. This, of course, is a clone that can copy any creature on the board, not just your own. And of course, if it is your own, great, that's cool, awesome. Copy your best creature, you got another copy of it, but it's even better than that creature because it also, again, connives on attack, meaning that it's helping you loot, getting card selection, not card advantage, but still like replacing dead cards in your hand. And of course, if you discard a non-land card, you're making that creature even bigger. So basically, you can get a creature copy of the best creature on the board, whether it's yours or an opponent's. And of course, you can also get a lot of value again throughout the game with that extra card selection and also growing that creature too. So yeah, you copy your opponent's best creature, you're like, oh, okay, cool. I attack. I discard a non-land card. Okay, cool. Looks like my clone is bigger than your creature, so good luck blocking it. Yay! Speaking of blocking, Homunculus Horde. This thing is disgusting. A 2/2 Homunculus for 3 and a blue. Whenever you draw your second card, each turn create a tokens copy of this creature. Again, this is not for every deck, and I'm not trying to say that every single one of these cards is for every deck. It's like you have to play it. It's not like Arcane Signet or whatnot, you know, for some people's opinion, that kind of a card, or a Soul Ring. But basically, when it comes to Homunculus Horde, again, if you've got those draw engines, you're in blue, right? You probably have a good amount of draw, a good amount of consistent draw. Even if you're just triggering this on your turn, I mean, this can get absurd. It is not Scoot Swarm. It is not Scoot Swarm. Scoot Swarm is so much easier to use and abuse because this is, again, limited to once each turn. Scoot Swarm is just get all the lands in play, and all of a sudden, yeah, you just, I mean, have fun using your math tables to see the exponential growth of your amount of tokens. But basically, this can also become absolutely absurd again. I don't think some players really understand just how absurd doubling something up every turn is, but it's crazy. I mean, basically, again, when you're drawing your second card in a turn, okay, you get a copy of this. Cool. So you get a copy of this, you go from 1 to 2. Then on the next turn, let's say you draw 2 more cards again. Congratulations. Well done. Now all of a sudden you've gone 2 to 4 because, again, those copies have this ability as well. 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, and then et cetera, all right? That's as high as I want to go right now. But it doesn't take long for you to have an absurdly dominating presence. Again, literally, if you just keep drawing 2 cards, again, you get your draw engines out, you keep drawing 2 cards every single turn. Again, even if it's just looting effects or whatnot, even if you're not actually gaining card advantage, you can very easily, within like 1 or 2 trips around the table, take over the game with this 2/2. That gets absolutely crazy. So it is a game ender, token populator, just it's absolutely crazy. A really cool card and a great finisher. Next up, Infestation Sage. Very simple, very effective. Basically a new Doom Traveler, essentially, but kind of like the exact same thing, but also in a very relevant tribe too. A 1/1 Warlock. I mean, Elf is the relevant part of this, but still. Warlock, I guess, sure, there's some Warlock tribal out there, but okay, Elf. A 1/1 Elf Warlock for a single black mana. When this creature dies, create a 1/1 black-green insect creature token with flying. again, we've gotten quite a few of these over the years. This one, again, should be seeing more play. Again, there's a lot of cards in the year. I mean, things get forgotten, all right. It just came out in Foundations too, but still, like, this one, again, is just basically yet another Doom Traveler. When it comes to creatures that you want in aristocrat style strategies, you want efficiency, you want creature fodder, and 2 creatures for the price of 1 is pretty great, especially when it's just 1 mana. You get it out early. Again, if you've got like Death Touch, you got doubling up death triggers is what the direction I was going to go with that. I was thinking of something else. Anyways, when it comes to like Teysa kind of decks as well, like again, like, oh, this dies, cool, I get 2, so it's 3 for the price of 1, just 1 mana. And again, those creatures have flying too, so they're actually like useful potentially as blockers, or you can get through them in combat as well. It's quite nice to have, again, those creature fodder creatures that are quite low to the ground and quite effective. And again, yeah, if you've got an elf deck too, this is basically, okay, a good low to the ground elf potentially. It depends on what kind of deck you're building, but still, tokens, aristocrats is usually we're going to go with this. 1 sacrifice decks. It's a lot of value to be had again for just a single mana. Moving on, Dire Sight. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe this one's not seeing more play. Search for 3 mana in total, surveil 2, draw 2, you lose 2 life. This is basically Read the Bones, but better. And Read the Bones is still seeing a lot more play than this one. Read the Bones is basically Scry 2, draw 2, lose 2, right? This one is Surveil 2, which is typically, I'm not going to say always, but for the vast majority of decks out there, the vast majority of circumstances, unless you're literally playing like Grenzo Dungeon Warden, not Grenzo, yeah, Grenzo, then yeah, you don't really care about the bottom of your library typically. Putting things in your graveyard is usually better. There's certain things that care about the number of cards in your graveyard. There's certain things that care about getting things back out of your graveyard, reanimating things from your graveyard, etc., etc. So yeah, putting things in your graveyard versus on the bottom of your library, typically better for you. Surveil is typically better than Scry. It's a very good card. Yes. Moving on. Pitiless Carnage. Speaking of card advantage though, my goodness. Sorcerer 4 mana in total, but you can actually plot it for 1 black, so you can just pay that, exile from your hand, and cast it later as a sorcery on a later turn for free. Only as a sorcery, plot it. Sacrifice any number of permanents you control, then draw that many cards. This is basically like reprocess, but even better. Being able to just play this whenever you need to, again, for free on a future one of your turns. Again, sorcery speed, sure, ensures that, okay, if I don't have a lot of things I want to sacrifice right now, or I've got like a large hand and I don't need to do that, but I've got extra mana lying around, sure, I'll pay 3 mana, leave it there. Again, plot gives you that amazing flexibility. I love that mechanic, just being able to just leave it. It's like kind of like foretell in a weird way, but like for free later, being able to just like get it out of there, just leave it up there. All right, it's outside of my hand. Cool. All right, I'm ready to cast it later when I need to. Then all of a sudden, once you have your board built up and you're ready to sacrifice those things, again, in a go wide strategy, in a token strategy, in aristocrat style strategy, and again, you're like, okay, cool. Now's the turn to utilize this. Now's the perfect opportunity to do so. And again, I've got that extra mana lying around now that I can utilize for those cards that I am drawing. Again, I sacrifice those things. I draw a ton of cards, and I've got mana to use them. Instead of being like, okay, I've got to spend the mana on this card. I'll draw these cards, and then hopefully by the time next turn comes around, I'm in a good position to actually utilize them. So yeah, being able to just like utilize those things right away, that is pretty huge. Next up. In red, Bulk Up. Oh my goodness, I love this card. Instant for 2 mana in red, double target creature's power until end of turn, flash it back for 6 mana. I feel like we started getting the like doubling power cards like 4, 5, 6 years ago. Maybe I'm forgetting one before that, but like we didn't really have like the double power necessarily. We had like, sure, double strike or like, gets +X+0 based on its power or that kind of stuff too. So sure, like in some ways we got doubling up, but like the actual just pure doubling up a power, yeah. There's like a similar card, the exact same card basically, without the flashback that we used to have, and now we have this. We have this, but it's got flashback as well. So if you've got the mana for it, I mean, this can just be like, I turn my commander into a surprise one-shot KO by going, okay, double power, double again. That's ×4 power to whatever creature again. Let's say my commander. That can just be if my commander, say, has 6 power inherently, that is a one-shot KO just by paying from this one card. Yeah, 8 mana, but again, in a game of Commander, games typically go like 10 rounds at least, typically, right? So like later in the game, you're gonna have 8 mana at some point, and this could just be like, oh, by the way, my commander just took you out. Cool. Yeah. I mean, that's not typically why you just include in the deck. Obviously, you'd have other ways to take advantage of power when you're utilizing a card like this. But yeah, at the very least, it's just like, oh, okay, cool. All of a sudden, I'm hitting incredibly hard. It doesn't even have to be your creature. Keep in mind, again, it's target creature's power. It's instant speed. If an opponent is getting through on another opponent with a creature, and they're like, oh, I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's like, yeah. but I actually kind of want them to take you out because you're a threat to me, and I think I can take that other player out. So I'm going to double up that creature's power, and if I get them in and double up it again, I can. It's not like if you utilize, it twice in the same turn. Obviously, if you utilize it early, you can also utilize it later by flashing it back. It's got a lot of flexibility to it in that way, but it's a very cool concept. Next up, Electro Duplicate. Somewhat similar in that it's like, okay, old card that we had that does a good thing that is needed in Commander, but now also basically a flashback too. We've got a sorcery for 3 mana in red. Create tokens, copy target creature you control except as haste. In the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token, flash it back for 4 mana in total. This is basically Heat Shimmer, but again, with flashback. So being able to be like, okay, I've got a temporary token of one of my creatures. That's kind of what red does versus blue. Blue is like permanent tokens of creatures. Red is like, okay, you get it temporarily. Cool, it's gone, but sure, you can flash it back too with this. So being able to be like, all right, I get an extra copy of one of my creatures. Maybe it's my big, heavy hitting creature. Maybe it's a creature that's got a great attack trigger. Maybe it's a creature that's got an amazing ETB. Maybe it's my commander and they've got a great death trigger. Whatever kind of, situation you're in where you'd be utilizing this, it is great and you can utilize it a second time. So again, in a circumstance where you draw this later in the game and you've got like a really dominant creature on the board, you're like, oh, if only I had more copies of this. Great, congratulations, you do now. You can utilize this once, twice, utilize it in both ways, and all of a sudden you are just taking out an opponent out of nowhere, or again, really taking advantage of those ETBs, LTBs, whatever you're taking advantage of. It's a great way to do so. And of course, keep in mind with cards like, like a populate type strategy, you can actually make the token copy and all of a sudden copy that with a populate effect, and then that one is also going to be staying around as well. Next up, Harnesser of Storms. Very simple, very effective. These are the types of cards, though, that actually, like, throw players off in evaluation sometimes because they're like, well, it says something that I'm not going to use. Who cares? 1/4 Otter Wizard for 3 mana in red. Whenever you cast a non-creature or otter, and that's the part that really throws people off, I feel like, you may exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay, so there is a limiting factor to this. I do understand that, obviously. The fact that it says Otter does not matter. You can literally just ignore that. It's not like, oh, this card is only for Otter Tribal. No, ignore that. Literally, do you play a Spellslinger deck? Do you play a deck that's a bunch of artifacts? Do you play a bunch of non-creature spells? Congratulations. It's a good card for those, especially again when you have instant speed type strategies with this too. Because essentially, again, you are impulse drawing, and again, it's a play, not just cast. So yeah, at the very least, it's like, okay, I cast a non-creature spell on my turn. Oh, top card of my library, it's a land. All right, good. I'm going to make sure I'm not dropping lands from my hand while I have this card in play until I'm sure that I am not hitting a land off the top. Because I get a free land off the top, perfect. I'll play that land. I can save the lands in my hand for later to make sure I hit land drops. But yeah, on your opponent's turns as well. Okay, I cast an instant. Oh, off the top of my library, cool. I got an instant card. All right, I can cast that one as well. Gives you extra value, potential on every single turn that you're playing. But also, yeah, just at the base level on your turn, getting an extra card to choose from. And yeah, I mean, maybe that's a land. Maybe it's a free land that you can play off the top. It can be quite nice. Moving on, Waltz of Rage. This is kind of like Chandra's Ignition, slightly different, but better in some ways, worse in some ways. Still a very good card. Source for 5 mana in red. Target creature control deals damage equal its power to each other creature. Until the end of turn, whenever a creature control dies, exile the top card of your library and play that card until the end of your next turn. So this one, again, Chandra's Addiction, I think the only difference in Chandra's Ignition is that one doesn't give you any kind of like impulse draw or whatnot, but it does hit your opponent's faces as well. So yeah, that is nice. But with this one, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Yes, I am utilizing, again, if I've got a creature with a good amount of power, and again, if you've got a commander that just has a decent amount of power, it's probably going to be a one-sided board wipe. I mean, you do take out your other creatures, but your commander or whatever it is stays in play. And then also, you're wide open to swing at someone, which is lovely. This can be a massive card advantage spell for you too, or temporary, I should say, with that impulse draw. Sure, you might take out some other creatures. That might be fine if you take out your other creatures, though. And again, you're replacing them with some impulse draw. Play into the end of your next turn. That does include lands. Again, it does say play, not just cast. So again, it is a board wipe with some actual, temporary card advantage in there too. And also kind of one-sided board wipe as well. Moving on to green. Analyze the Pollen. Sorcery for a single green mana. You can also collect evidence 8 if you want to, which is exiling cards with total mana value 8 or greater from your graveyard. Search life for a base land card. If evidence was collected instead, search life for a creature or a land card, reel it, and put it in your hand, then shuffle. This, again, early game. Again, I feel like people kind of downplay the significance of just, like, making sure you hit your land drops sometimes. Yes, ramp spells are much better. I do agree. But, like, this is, like, an additional card in your deck that can just help you if you get it early, where it's like, oh, okay, I can make sure I hit my land drops. Great. It's not the best thing to draw early, but it's not a dead card for you. And in fact, sometimes it might save you and be like, oh, okay, cool. I wouldn't be able to play this hand, but like since I have this, I can actually turn 1, go get that land, turn 2, use the land, and then rampant growth or whatever else I have in my hand. Cool, good for me. It keeps you from having a dead hand. But as an additional card later to be like an amazing tutor for you to go get the creature that you need, collect evidence 8 isn't that much. It might seem like a lot, but again, like 8 mana value in total can be 2 cards. I mean, it can sometimes be 1 card for certain decks out there, right? But like typically it could be like, yeah, 2 4 mana value cards, or you know, maybe 3 cards, whatever it is. Later in the game, it's going to be quite easy for you to actually collect that evidence, and it becomes a 1 mana tutor for a creature. Again, early on in the game, you're typically not going to be like, okay, I really need a tutor for a creature right now, unless you're like early game comboing, which typically you're not doing in casual Commander. So with this, it's like early game, if you have it, it's not the best thing, but it can save you from being like, I should probably just mulligan this hand. It can save you from that. It can be great at helping you hit your land drops, and later in the game can be an amazing, again, 1 mana tutor. And again, how many 1 mana tutors are there? Essentially, again, for creatures, typically they're, I mean, like worldly tutor kind of things, like those are like, oh, like top of the library. It's still, I mean, those are amazing cards, obviously much better than this. I'm not saying that this is better than those, but it's still a very good card that I think people underplay because they're like, 8's a lot. It's not really a lot at all. If you play like a couple cards, you're going to have enough cards in your graveyard, essentially, to be able to do that. So just keep that in mind. Next up, Tender Wild Guide, a 2/2 Possum Druid for 2 mana in green, Offspring for 2. So again, you can pay an extra 2 as you cast it. If you do create a token copy of it that's a 1/1. Tap for 1 mana of any color, tap, we're going to counter onto this creature. So this is a creature where, again, when it comes to mana dorks, we are getting more and more these days at 2 mana value that are more flexible, that give you like extra value, which is lovely, versus just like, yeah, it's just a worse Llanowar Elves. I mean, Llanowar Elves taps for a green, and I guess, you know, like the creature costs 2 and taps for 1 of any color. That's like kind of how we used to get them, where it's like, yeah, it's like worse but better, and like no one ever played them. This is essentially like, hey, you know what? You get that mana. You get that mana, that 1 mana of any color, which is great mana fixing, obviously, but also you get flexibility where it's like, okay, yeah, sure. If it's just sitting around, you get counters on it, which is nice, but also you can offspring it. Again, if you are a little later in the game, you're like, you know what? Instead of ramping by 1, I'm going to ramp by 2. And now I've got 2 of these mana dorks in play, which is lovely. And also, again, if I need to start like building them up, build their power up, I can. So a lot of cool synergies with this one with, you know, +1 counter synergies, mana dork synergies, ramping synergies, populate synergies, a lot of different synergies for this. So I just like that they're starting to give us like better mana dorks that aren't just like worse versions of Llanowar Elves or worse versions of other ones, etc., etc. Next up, Sage of the Maze. Speaking of which, a 1/3 elf wizard for 3 mana in green. Tap, add 2 mana, any combination of colors. You can just stop right there. Again, this is another one of those cards where, kind of like the otter I talked about earlier, where sometimes when a card mentions more things, it actually gets played less. It's very strange to me where people like can't just kind of like, gosh, there's like a gate to the afterlife or whatever like that one is. It's like whenever a creature dies, like when a non-token creature dies, you like draw a card and discard a card, gain 1 life. But also like mentions sacrificing it to go get like another card, and you're like, well, if I don't have that card in my deck, then I'm not going to use it. It's like, no, just ignore that text. Ignore it. This one says, tap, until end of turn, target land you control becomes an XX citizen creature with haste, addition to other types, or X is twice the number of gates you control. Active on sorcery. Tap and untap gate you control, untap Sage of the Maze. If you don't have any gates in your deck, it's not like, well, I can't play this. No, ignore that part. If you've got gates in your deck, cool, that's great. Good for you. This can help you with those. If you don't have gates, you can literally just ignore that and be like, okay, this is a mana dork that can cost 3 and tap for 2 in any combination of colors. Yeah, that's quite effective. That is a very effective, efficient mana dork for you. So yes, if you're looking for a mana dork that can really help you fix your mana, again, any combination of colors, at 3 mana is a very, very spectacular mana dork for you. And you can ignore that gate part. Just ignore it. Stop reading. Just stop reading right there and be like, it's good enough at the top. And it's got 2 relevant creature types as well, so do keep that in mind. Moving on. Scrap Shooter, a 4/4 Raccoon Archer for 3 mana in green. Gift a card, reach, enters if the gift was promised or target artifact or enchantment opponent controls. Here's the thing. This is, I mean, yeah, like, hey, Rexage, but better. Here's the thing. Okay, it is slightly worse when it comes to the mana value, right? It costs, I mean, mana value is the same, but like the actual pips, right? It's harder to cast, yes, but you probably have enough mana fixing that you can really afford that extra green pip, right? It costs the exact same amount at 3 mana. It does have a downside where it's like, okay, if I want to destroy an artifact or enchantment, I have to gift a card. Here's the thing. You don't have to benefit the opponent that you're taking the thing out of. You don't have to give that opponent that you're destroying the artifact or enchantment. You're already upsetting that player, right, by doing that. Why would you give them the card? Why would you say, well, you know what? Let me take something away from you, but give you something. Like, you're not getting anything out of that. With this, you can literally politic. You can go, okay, hey, players over here. Yeah, you two other players that are not the player with the thing that I'm going to destroy, okay? I'm doing this for everyone because none of us like that person having Rhystic Study or whatever that card is, right? You're already getting some nice, press isn't the right word, but like you're getting like some good vibes from the other players. They're like, oh yeah, thank you. Thank you for helping us all out by destroying that Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, whatever it is that player has. Cool, you're destroying that, you're helping everyone out. Now I, as this very generous player playing Scrap Shooter, will also grant one of the two of you a card. What can you give me in return? Could you give me a turn off of you swinging at me? Could you agree to, if you've got a removal spell, take that out for me as well? You can make a deal with that. And again, being able to have that flexibility, being able to have that, politicking can really help you out a ton. On top of this being a 4/4 with reach for just 3 mana, it's a good body already. And on top of that, you don't have to promise the gift if you got nothing to destroy, you just need a creature on the field. This is a very solid card, and it should be seeing more play. And yeah, I think people just are like, I think the thought behind like gift is like, oh, I really don't want to give up a card. It's like, okay, giving up a card's not the best thing, but again, there are ways to benefit from it still. There are ways to politic with that, and you don't have to give it to the player that you are hurting unless it's literally a one-on-one scenario. That is the only scenario where you're literally like, oh, okay, I guess I destroy your Smothering Tithe and I give you a card, which again, if it's worth destroying the artifact or enchantment, it's worth doing it for that card if you are going to be doing that. If it's not worth it, if it's like, I guess I could destroy your Arcane Signet and give you a card, probably not worth it. So yeah, you have the option. You don't have to do that. It's a really, really solid card. Again, like, better than Rex Sage in a lot of situations. Again, if you're not in like 5 color and like I need to make sure I can fix my mana for this to do so. Moving on, speaking of multicolored, Anthem of Champions, an enchantment for 2 mana in Selesnya. Creatures you control get ++1. This is a very solid anthem, very low to the ground. Again, when it comes to anthems, like the typical anthems outside of that one from Lord of the Rings, is basically like, okay, it costs 3 mana to get ++1. That's just what we usually have had. Now, finally, it's like, okay, a lower to the ground enchantment. Yeah, it's a bit more specific in what decks it needs to be in. Obviously, Selesnya. Yeah, it's a little harder to cast, I guess, technically, but not really, because Gaia's Anthem or Glorious Anthem each costs like 1 and 2 pips, sure, the same color, but still, yeah, this is just a very solid anthem. Again, 2 mana for an anthem these days, that's great. So yeah, it's good. Use it. Finally, I guess this is technically colorless in the way that it was organized. It is technically colorless, but like Devoid's like a weird mechanic that's like, oh, okay, cool, I guess. 2/1 Eldrazi Fairy Rogue for 1 and a blue, but it's colorless because it's got Devoid. Flying, whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token, sacrifice creature, add a colorless. Again, this is kind of like for the exact same reasons that I mentioned essentially with Mischievous Mystic. Again, it's basically the exact same card in a way against a 2/1 flyer that basically does the exact same thing. You're making a token, you draw a second card on each turn, not just your own. That being said, the difference between this one and the Mystic is the Mystic gives you 1/1 flyers. This one gives you 0/1s, but they can be sacrificed for mana. So essentially, you are kind of, I mean, not ramping, but like temporary ramping in a way, by actually just drawing cards. And that is huge. Being able to just draw cards throughout the game, bank a bunch of mana off these Eldrazi spawns and utilize when you need to, that's great. So again, both can definitely be utilized in the same deck. They can be utilized in different decks depending on like, oh, okay, I've got like sacrifice triggers I can benefit off of. I've got, a bunch of like ritual effects that I can really benefit off of by just like sacrificing all these spawns and utilizing all that mana all at once for these massive spells. Whatever it's going to be, or like Eldrazi Tribal, sure. But yes, being able to utilize this in similar and different ways, this Mischievous Mystic are both great. Again, if you are interested in any of these cards, again, they are all fantastic cards. Not for every single deck out there, but for the right decks, they are really, really cool cards. Make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. And with that, this episode is coming to a close. Comment below with your thoughts on it. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.